This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Hey, this will be fun. Rossin.
Good evening.
Hi, Ross.
Hi, Bill.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And thank you for this remarkable portrait that we're going to get a chance to discuss tonight.
Thank you to Emory and the Center for Ethics to give me the opportunity to do this and to provoke my imagination, my thinking.
So you have worked on this, you've absorbed it, you've seen it over and over again, but now that it's been exposed to an audience of several hundred people here, just as a starting point, what's it like when you look at it and then see that people are getting a chance to see what you've created?
You know, I think of this as a mirror of our pain, as a mirror of our secret fears and moments of lack of love and acceptance. Throughout the conversation, we'll go back again and again to this very important word, lack of acceptance. Yeah. So I hope the first impression is exactly this, to see this, to sense that pain.
And you're right, we are going to talk about those themes. So with your permission, I'd love to have a conversation. Certainly I want to talk about your technique because you are such a well-known portrait artist and your technique is fascinating and I think revealing and came into play with what you did here. I want to talk a little bit about the themes that you just mentioned in terms of what we see in the face that you created. And then let's talk about the ethics since we are doing a program for the Center for Ethics. How's that?
It's all about the ethics.
Yeah.
Art is all about the ethics, yes.
So if we can, let me start with this. I don't think I'd read Frankenstein, the novel, since I was in high school, and frankly, I can't remember whether I ever actually read the whole book. Of course, I saw the original Boris Karloff picture, or what to me was the original picture. But the book is entirely different than the movie. Entirely different. There's not even a creation scene. The most famous scene in the movie, the animation of the monster, Mary Shelley skips. We just see the creature as we heard a minute ago when Victor Frankenstein first sees him. But relevant to what you've done here is the image that we're so familiar with is Boris Karloff as the monster. Was that in the back of is it hard to have gotten that out of your head, that iconic image of the monster played by him?
Let me go back a little bit in your question. You know, in my opinion, the genius of Mary Shelley is the fact that she gives us just enough room for interpretation. Every generation, every artist, every critic, every thinker could go back to her novel and read it again and again with new eyes. So you see, every 50 or so years, we read it again with new eyes. So whether or not I had anything to do with this initial idea, this mass idea of Boris Karloff face, which you can find in every party store or anything, no. I mean, I was very careful to be faithful to my own idea, my own relations with Mary Shelley, and I cannot emphasize this more, with Mary Shelley, not so much with the book.
Sure.
You see, because ultimately it's her spirit, very young spirit, that is. She was only 19. Let's not forget when she conceived the idea, she was only 21 when the book came out. We see in the book. So connecting with her was my approach. So I went back to the book and read some parts that I needed to read. But again, I remain faithful to how I feel and how I connect with her. That was my starting point.
Oh, sure, because I mean, obviously your portrait has nothing to do with the image that we saw from the pictures. I just wondered if somewhere that gets stuck in your head and you have to remove it to move forward. So what is it about Mary Shelley's spirit that inspired you as you began thinking about how the monster would look?
Very complex situation, because in one hand she's very young, physically young, but then her soul is very old, very wise. She's been born before again and again, okay? She knows more about life than most of us. And it's remarkable in this young age to have such understanding of human pain and torture. No wonder, it's a masterpiece and lasts for so long.
Yeah, she dealt with death. We heard that earlier in the program. It was a subject very familiar to her. And when we hear her describing how the image of the book came to her, the story came to her, we realize it's in many ways a manifestation of her trying to grapple with death, yes?
She never met her mother.
Yeah.
She grew up without her, so she grew up without love. Can you imagine this? She had miscarriage already. She left a rebellious life, but she dealt with lack of acceptance on every level, in society, in her family, everywhere. So all this is there. That's why my approach is through her, to understand Frankenstein and the creation through her, and have her spirit be part of the portrait, part of the painting, hopefully.
In some ways, she helps an artist to come up with, in your case, your own perception, because number one, she never gives the monster a name.
Yes.
Which is really interesting, isn't
Amazing. It? Yes. You're free to give your own name. Call him whatever you want. I personally call him Adam Frankenstein. This is how he himself referred to him, to him, talking to his creator. Oh, I'm your Adam of your creation. So that was just mentioned briefly, but Mary Shelley didn't intend to call him. I call him like this because I feel like this. So, but you're free. You can call him anything you want. All of us, we can call him anything we want, but go back to my first phrase, what I first said. It mirrors again and again our own fears, our own moments of cold shoulder and unacceptance.
Well, and what adds to that, excuse me, that notion that we bring our own fears to it, is she never really describes him except in the vaguest terms. We only know what the monster looks like based on the revulsion that Victor Frankenstein expresses in seeing this, this monstrous creature.
Again, she leaves just enough room for us to see him the way we want to see him. The way we, 200 years later, and for centuries to come, future generations will see him. So, and their selves, which makes it really particularly special. Let's not forget that the real piece of art is something that you could go and read and try to understand, but the real piece of art is the piece of art that reads you back as a viewer.
What does that mean? Help me understand that.
Simple example, the Bible, okay? It's a book, okay? You read it, you learn something, moves you, helps your faith in everything. The more you read, the better you understand that actually the Bible reads you back. Okay, that's a book. But that's a kind of basic example. But same with the great music you've heard 10 minutes ago. You see, we had this conversation in the green room. It is so timeless that it's also contemporary. You can see that, and it moves you and makes you understand things about yourself you never even considered, thinking about. So I hope one of my hopes is this painting or really does exactly this. We'll get there.
We will get there. But before we do, you asked a question in an interview that you had some time ago, I think with the AJC, Kevin Riley, who's here tonight. I think you raised the question as he talked to you about why is this book, why is this story 200 years later still completely captivating to us? How do you answer that question?
Because we all, regardless how happy we are in our lives, regardless how successful, inevitably, at one point in our lives, in different degree, we experience hatred. And that's very important. And to know. We either personally experience it, or we have it in our hearts, have hatred, we have to admit it, or we see it, at least. We witness it, and we become numb at some point to witnessing hatred in our country, in our community, in the world, tragedy every day. We almost get numb, and that's tragic. That's why Frankenstein will be relevant forever, because unfortunately, negativity and hatred will exist forever.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting, even beyond just the way in which the monster is treated, and I was startled when I came across this, because I have no memory of it from reading the novel previously. There's even a storyline in the novel that deals with bigotry against Muslims. And I was stunned when I came across it. People who have read the book will know what I'm talking about. If not, you should read it, and you'll see that there's a character, a Turkish man, who is treated, he's treated with hatred simply because of his religion. That really struck me as being remarkable, given what we're living through now.
Unbelievable, so early. We're talking 1818, all right? This is amazing, of course. What can I say? More and more relevant.
Can we talk about the painting?
Yes, please.
And how it reflects the journey that the monster has, okay? First of all, you chose to make the monster really young. How old is your son?
18 and a half, yeah.
18 and a half. Mm-hmm. This monster is not much older than your son, is he?
Yes. Yes. Again, going back to Mary Shelley, she was 19 when she conceived the idea. So she was wise, she was very mature, but she was also very, very young. I mean, frightfully young when she decided to do something so monumentally important. The idea, I mean, let's not forget that Victor Frankenstein's idea was to create something new, something wonderful, something great. That's why he was called the Prometheus in the title. Just like I keep thinking, I keep going back to this tragic occurrence of events in human history, which I personally experienced, and many of us experience one way or another. So many beautiful things start young and fresh, with beautiful ideas, social new changes and systems that go ugly eventually, go bloody, right? Go terrible. Here's your different dimension. But at the beginning, they're young. So he must have been young because of his, because of Mary, because of the idea of Victor Frankenstein. So young, but then again, impossible to look to. But then again, you have a third look. And then you try to understand better what really is going on.
Well, okay, so with that in mind, the monster is animated. And we can see in your portrait that I'm imagining, when I look at your portrait, this is not the monster as he is initially animated. This is what the monster develops into physically over a period of time. And let me tell you why I'm suggesting that, and you respond to it. When the monster is first animated, he looks to Frankenstein as a father, as someone who he needs to look up to, who he wants to bond with, who he cares about. He can't help. It's not his fault that Frankenstein rejects him so entirely, so quickly. So my guess is the monster initially doesn't quite look like this portrait, yes?
Yes, naturally. None of us, when we are born, everybody's innocent and quite cute. Eventually, experience so much negativity and rejection, many of our society turn into monsters. Clearly. This is almost very basic, but sometimes we just forget about it, and we judge by appearances, prefer to see what divides us instead of what unites us. So
yeah. I mean, this monster goes on a journey. That's fascinating. He is trying, and this is where certainly the ethical aspects of the story come into play in a big way. The journey that Mary Shelley takes him on is one of what does it mean to become human in the real world? He does not start as human, but he observes behavior in the world. He sees kindness in the world. He begins to learn language. He actually starts to read books like Paradise Lost. He's becoming a prescient being who wants to be fully engaged in the world around him.
Yeah, and you see, that's even more tragic because he sees what he doesn't have. See, he understands what's denied to him. Talk about social media and Facebook. I mean, it's almost tragic for so many people to have the ability to see what they don't have. Yes, indeed. And little by little, he turns into a murderous machine. But we must not forget that he's very intelligent. He speaks fluent. Only within 11 months or so, he speaks fluent German and French. Towards the end of the book, he already speaks English. He certainly knows more languages than I do. And he's very eloquent, and that's why one of the distinction which I make between my work and the early movies they made about him is like a mute, imbecile creature that barely talks and walks. This is not exactly the case. And that makes this character all the more tragic and complex and asking for understanding.
Frankenstein becomes only the first of many people who are repulsed by him and reject him. And he does eventually, as you say, become a murderer. He ends up raging against a world that will not accept him. You know what I thought was interesting about that? Before we actually turn to how you did the portrait, we are, of course, told over and over again in the book about how lonely the monster is, how much he desires affection. He actually threatens Victor Frankenstein when he confronts him at one point that if he doesn't create a mate, he'll probably kill Frankenstein or engage in violent behavior against some of Frankenstein's family. So he, we know, is intensely lonely. But as I read the book, it occurred to me, they're both immensely lonely creatures. They're both locked in to their own loneliness. And they have a symbiotic relationship that is really powerful because neither of them has any, neither of them can get any solace out of this relationship.
I think I mean, that's a great point you're making. Thank you for doing that. Victor Frankenstein, in my opinion, is just as tragic as his creation. He, not for a moment in the book, he realizes that he needs his creature. He needs him closer to himself, regardless how repulsive he is, regardless how disappointing the experiment turns. He needs him just as much. And that never happens, and the tragedy is right there, and that's what we don't understand. As very quick to reject, very quick to say no, very quick to say goodbye or discriminate. We don't understand that we need that person that doesn't think like us, that doesn't look like us, but we need him, we need her, we need them, and that's critically important to understand. I hope that's one of the ideas that are intertwined into this work. Okay, so all these themes came into play, and you're thinking about the creature and how you'd finally envision him and paint him. But before we get to just what you've done on the canvas, your technique is really interesting. I read an article about you a while back. We know you're fascinated and have done portraits of United States presidents. We know you've done Hank Aaron, Andy Young, Maya Angelou, whose family chose your image of her to be on the U.S. postage stamp. I mean, you have a remarkable career, and we should acknowledge it. Thank you. But I was struck by something you said to an interviewer, I think it's a while ago, about a portrait you did of Abraham Lincoln. I think the interviewer asked you whether you'd gone to see the Daniel Day-Lewis picture. What'd you say at that time? You hadn't. And there was a reason you hadn't. Why? Again, for the same reason, I want to keep my relations with Abe Lincoln and my models pristine and pure and clean and with no influence, because they're very special relations. You see, making a portrait is not just depicting someone who's sitting in front of you and merely copying the physical object or the character or anything. Much more than that, it's a process. It's a dialogue which I have with my model. It's about my relations with my model, and so to a large extent, every portrait is also a self-portrait in that sense. So that's why I would rather abstain from any influences of any kind. I will isolate myself, kind of a method actor, if you will. So I would love to understand and see my angle to that particular object I'm trying to depict.
Okay, so that was interesting. We won't go into how you came up with your image of Lincoln, but it relates to this. Again, excuse me. How do you commune with the monster? What is your process? Are you sitting in a dark room with your eyes closed? I mean, what happened? Yeah. You know, you've worked with many models, live models. You've worked with photographs of various people whose portraits you've done. In this case, you had nothing in terms of physical, a physical model to work with. How are you communing with this?
Yeah, well, almost nothing. I spent with the model, 18 and a half something years together. So he's my own son, and that was the very initial idea I had in mind when we had the initial conversation about Frankenstein. I knew he's going to be my model for that same reasons. You see, creation.
You're sort of his Adam.
But then again, the dark part, the dark side is when he left the room. We already surrounded myself with sketches and pictures and everything, and I was alone and started changing his face. So it's not exactly the easiest time and process to make your beautiful son's face ugly, hideously ugly. And he's a handsome boy. I mean, I must admit it. And now when he saw the finished work, he deeply regrets participating in this project. He said, "No, that was a mistake," clearly. Anyway, but obviously at some point I forget that's Michael. It's not Michael anymore. It's like a broken mirror, and I started adding and changing everything with anger and pain and frustration, which was in me, basically. Experiencing whatever I experienced for 53 years in this world, political and social and economical changes, you know, in different countries, different continents, changing lifestyles and living as an artist. This is not exactly the funniest thing and the easiest thing on earth, and experience so many situations in life when I could see a little bit too much drama. And again, go back to what I said first. It turns out into a mirror of my own inner drama, you see?
So is your pain...
It ceased to be Michael. It's not Michael anymore since the moment I started.
Okay, but if we were to strip this back and take away the monstrous features that
you will see Michael,
we'd see your son Michael.
Yeah, you will see Michael.
And that's really interesting to me too, because you told me your son Michael has just gone off to college. He's embarked on this new journey in life. It's all fresh and about to happen for him in a really wonderful way. Many of us have been through that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
But then you add all this to him.
Yes.
But is your pain reflected in this, are you telling us?
I'm sorry?
Is your pain and anger, is that reflected
Inevitably. At some point, you have to understand, I use brushes, obviously, and paint. There's nothing really, there is no secret. It's a classical painting. You see the same technique in the museums, no different. But the truth is, at some point, you don't paint with brushes and paints. You paint with blood and tears. This is how it works, all right? Everything that's here goes there. This is how it works.
Okay, well, this isn't a confessional. But you're a very thoughtful guy, obviously. What are some of the things that you struggle with? What's some of the pain that we see in this painting that you've dealt with? Again, I'm really not trying to get into your intimate life, but I'm wondering if it operates on a social level somewhere.
I'm having a hard time dealing with the fact that millions of people are dying as we speak and suffer tremendously as we speak. And we almost don't pay attention or very quickly judge one situation and another, celebrate one leader or another, which he or she doesn't deserve this celebration. And being an artist means nothing else but being super sensitive, ultra sensitive about things. So caring about the other fellow humans, caring about the misfortune in the world is just enough reason to go and do something like this.
I'm really glad you said that, because when I first looked at your portrait, what I really saw in the monster, and of course the joy of being a portrait artist is you get to hear different people react differently. We read into it what we see, what we want to see in some ways. But I see less hatred in that face and more pain and sadness. Do you feel I'm right about that? Is that what the dominant feeling is?
Hatred is the cause. Pain is the result. So you should be able to go beyond the pain and beyond the obvious ugliness and even the murderous acts and see what caused all this. So I hope, not just this work, but any art piece, any beautiful music, help us to liberate ourselves from hatred and to have zero tolerance to hatred. That's what art is all about anyway.
But sadness is a more dominant emotion in your monster than is the rage, which leads him to kill a number of people, innocent people, yes?
Sadly, yes. I mean, obviously, had he enjoyed normal human love and acceptance, he would have been different, despite his kind of monstrous look and everything. The look doesn't really matter. It's all about the soul. But if we have to take it to another level, we have to deal with another aspect which is critically important. All of us as human beings, regardless of our fortunes or misfortunes and everything, we carry that God's particle in us, the sparkle in us, and we have this last chance of confession, of forgiveness, of mercy. You see, he's denied this because a human created him, and obviously not so successfully. And he's denied even the love of that human, so he has nothing, absolutely nothing. I travel to India every year and roam the streets in various cities and various streets and try to communicate and take pictures of all kinds of folks on the street who, for one simple reason, they have absolutely nothing, nothing material, nothing remotely close to what we all have. But they have themselves, and they have their faith, and they have their God, they have their spirit, their connection with the universe. They have this unique sense of oneness of the universe. There is no such thing here. There is no oneness of the universe. You see that gaze, empty gaze, which is much scarier than the wounds and the scars and everything. So that's really, for me, it's really important to capture on the canvas and to have those ideas conveyed to the viewer.
Yeah, I mean, that's really an important point. If those of you, you'll get a chance to come up and look at it, but, you're right. The eyes are so empty. Which raises one of the questions that is part of the ethical conversation about the novel. He is striving to be human. He's learning all of the aspects, mimicking what human behavior is. But is he human? Your portrait suggests probably not. Does he have a soul? When I look at his eyes, I say no.
You see, there are a lot of people who are not humans, who don't necessarily have soul. I know, I've seen animals that have more soul than some people. You see, there are such monstrous creatures out there that are unbelievable. They have human shape, but they're hardly you can call them human. You see, the very idea of what's human, what's humane, it's really, really slippery, really, really, really difficult to point. But certainly, you see, he has emotions. He's intelligent. He's a complex creature. He's eloquent in his speech. So he appears to be human. Again, I wonder if Victor Frankenstein gave him what he needed. I wonder if Mary Shelley would come back and write the second novel, that somehow they survived, somehow they connected, and to see what's next, what love is capable of. I don't know. I'm just curious. Is it enough? Can love make you human? Can love make a flower, human creature? Certainly, I can see it in the eyes of innocent animals, of course. What is soul? What is the self within? Those are serious, critical questions. What makes our souls eternal?
When Mary Shelley wrote the novel, there were aspects of working on this novel that haunted her, that entered into her dreams. She was possessed by it. As you transformed your handsome, young, college-bound freshman son into this horrible monster, did it possess you in that way at all, emotionally? Did it grip you? Did it enter your dreams? Did it frighten you? How did you react emotionally as you started this transformation?
Honestly, I was surprised to. I wasn't. No, it didn't do anything bad to me. On the contrary, it actually, in a way, changed me. It made me understand, have better understanding of people who very quickly we can call criminals. We can quickly, judge, for their behavior, and made me think, you know what? I mean, spending some time with him and him coming closer and closer to me day after day after day, and at some point he basically is right here on the easel, one-on-one. He literally came from the nothingness, came to life in the studio, and I think he made me a better person.
Really?
Honestly, I swear to God.
Because of the things we've been talking about.
Precisely,
yeah.
Precisely. He made me understand better all the people who I just two months ago I would think differently. I would be a little bit too quick to judge and too quick to say, oh, forget them, or forget that, or forget this criminal. No. Obviously, something's missing in their life. Made me maybe someone who wants to, if nothing else, I'm far from perfect, obviously, but someone who wants to understand and get to the bottom of things versus quick, superficial judgment.
So let's talk technique. And let's answer a question that I know you get asked all the time, or a comment that is made about your work, and I want to get your response because I know you have a good one. People say about your work, and some people will see the portraits that are on display upstairs at the Schwartz Center, examples of your work. Gee, you do photorealistic work. Your paintings look like photographs. Your answer to that is?
The photographs try to look like my paintings.
But you really mean something by that.
I really mean
What do you mean by that?
I really mean it, and I say this with proper respect to our fellow artists, photographers. No, just because there is something magical about the human hand. You see the connection between the human mind and the human heart and the hand. You see, as accurate as it looks, and the portrait as accurate as they look, they're not that accurate, actually. There are thousands, maybe tens of thousands, tiny little mistakes, quote to quote, which make it different from the photograph, make it different from reality, because the soul of the artist is there because of it is handmade, for that simple technical reason, okay? Inevitably, no matter the training and whatever, ability, talent, whatever, still, it is handmade, therefore it is unique, it is special. So regardless how realistic it looks, it has certain vibration there, a certain element of soul and personal touch and personal presence that makes it unique. Unlike in photography, you have this moment missing, basically. It's mechanical, no matter how great the photographer, and there are great photographers out there, I'm not saying anything, but it's still inevitably limited. It's mechanical to a certain point. You click, you print, click, you print. That's about it. Of course, you deal with different kind of problems there, different kind of aesthetical and whatever ethical issues, but in a painting, and I'm nothing else other than keeper of the tradition, basically. Like I told you, it's an oil on canvas painting you see in every museum around the world. There is no different as far as technique goes, but it's about this unique bridge, a unique line of communication between me, the artist, and the model. It's that silent dialogue we have, which silent dialogue eventually, sometimes in centuries or millennia, continues with the viewer and the art, and that's quite unique if you come to think about it.
You've said that every single little detail, as you're doing a portrait, can alter what the look is, who the person is, so that you've said a little corner of the mouth downturned, an eyebrow at a different angle. Help us understand what that means, and can we see that in this painting?
You see, human face, the reason I do portraits is human face is unique in that sense. It's like a piece of symphony, like orchestra. Every element works, every element matters. Everything is connected to everything else. You see, the tiniest change of the position of the eyebrow changes the expression, changes the character, changes the message, the energy of the face. So naturally, you have to imagine. You don't have to be a professional to understand this and to really feel this. How, just like a movie director or an actor and everything, they work carefully on the expression. It conveys ideas, conveys energy. So naturally, as a portrait artist, I'm very careful and always take care of the balance of things and how they work together. As much as I pay attention to the tiniest detail, I much more pay attention to the whole, how the whole works, like a symphony orchestra.
Okay, but as I look at the painting, so for instance, there are drops of water or sweat coming down the monster's face, really in his lower face particularly. And I'm just curious, where did that come from? Why did you decide to do that?
It just occurred to me that will add more drama and more to the pain. Okay. You see? You see, it gets even beyond. There's something more is going on. He's coming from somewhere, going somewhere, or something's not right. And that additionally conveys those same sentiments.
So you add details like that because you do want to have a sense of drama. It tells us something perhaps about the journey, even if it isn't necessarily accurate to what your vision of his actual face looks like.
Precisely.
Fair enough?
Precisely. Going back to the photographs, trying to look like paintings.
Yeah, right. Okay, so you have established this remarkable reputation for portraiture. I was curious, when I look at some of your work, I wonder how you view the work of other portrait artists that might be familiar to us who are here tonight. So for instance, I'm wondering, when you look at Chuck Close's work, that photorealistic, extreme though close, he brings us right on top of the faces. What do you think when you see a Chuck Close, for instance, and how it's different from what you do?
Well, first of all, I have a great admiration of his work. I'm a huge fan, naturally, one of the biggest names in our time, and I grew up with looking into his work, and he inspires me. But that's about it. Everything else is different. And the reason is, when you stand in front of Close's work, there is this barrier, like a glass wall of cold distance. No matter how close you get, his models are still distant.
That's really remarkable. You're right. We're so close, but we're not.
True, true. And he intends to do that. That's his genius. That's his thing. And that's his message and everything, a statement, artistic statement. I'm trying to do exactly the opposite. I invite my viewers to go inside, into the mind of my models, to take this journey into one's psyche and see what's going deep, deep, deep down there, so intimately, so uniquely perfect in a sense that I think that's the major difference between my work and his work.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, but that was, okay, so that's interesting too, this notion of getting deeper and deeper and seeing deeper into the soul of your subject. So that raises, again, Center for Ethics here, that raises a question for me. Are there ethics involved in how you choose to create a portrait? Can you go out of bounds in finding too much truth? Or are you a journalist who, under any circumstances, must reveal the truth of a subject you're painting?
You see, you just answered your own question. I'm just like you. I'm a journalist. I have to do it. I have to go there. That's why you and I go to hell, all right? It's not that... It's not ethical.
That's got to be painful.
But somebody needs to go there, all right? Somebody needs to do it, right?
Well, I mean, look, we're well aware in history of any number of portrait artists who have created works that the person who's sitting for the portrait is rejected out of hand because there was either too much truth or not enough, semblance of reality there. All right.
That's it, yeah, but okay, that's the choice we make in our life. And
that's brave. There's a certain bravery to being willing to go there, I think, isn't there?
It is, because the deeper you go, the more you understand the divine nature of all of us, literally all of us, and this is so beautiful and so perfect, and then you have to go back home, and life itself is less than perfect. Yeah. The mundane aspect of life is less than perfect, and that bothers you. You still want to go back there. You need that drug. You need that connection with the divine aspect. You need that meditation, and that's one of the things you never realize when you start the journey from the beginning.
And that's also takes us back to Frankenstein. The monster is striving for perfection. He's striving for the divine. He understands the spark of the divine based on all he's learning out in the world, and yet he's continually brought back to the reality of an ugliness around him that eventually turns him evil and brings him down.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
That's basically the artist's life.
We're almost out of time, but you and I talked briefly about the picture of Dorian Gray, the Oscar Wilde story, and most people know it, but Dorian Gray, young Brit who lives a life of debauchery and carefree behavior, while the portrait that's been done of him, he never gets older, the portrait is moldering in an attic in his home. And a Chicago artist named Ivan Albright was commissioned to paint the portrait of Dorian Gray for the picture. And you said an interesting thing about how you think the story of Dorian Gray in some ways relates to Frankenstein, and it's probably a great place to finish our conversation. What are the parallels?
Well, you have to, they both deal with, again, I guess, with inevitably going to the divine aspect of existence, which is very important to know for all of us. And both Oscar Wilde and Mary Shelley deal with it in a phenomenally beautiful way from the two opposite positions, you see, and they meet in the middle. The result in both cases is hideously ugly, and it's tragic. The living Dorian Gray is always beautiful. The creation that Victor Frankenstein had in mind was beautiful as an idea, but turn into something ugly. So they inevitably blend in the middle. But they ultimately have to do with not having, not understanding the divine nature of human existence, the importance of love and acceptance, the importance of being absolutely liberated from hatred and vanity. This is all those simple things that we simply need to remind ourselves.
Well, Rossin, I'm struck by how the book Frankenstein made you think, as you said, about aspects of life that you had not thought about before, made you perhaps more empathetic, more compassionate. And I think what we all owe you as we look at your portrait is thanks for doing the same thing. The portrait of what the world has turned your monster into, it strikes me, ought to remind us of just how much impact hatred, bigotry, mistrust can have on a creature, human or not. Thank you for your remarkable work.
Thank you. Thank you.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.